So you can see here's a different approach that they're using, but how it's growing. And I will comment and say, this is really neat, Dennis, especially about the Building Men for Christ. I went to Omaha in January, Mike's request, and did a Building Men for Christ event that they have now taken and have given it 3 times now? 3 times. So it's reaching out. It's that networking, that spider web, the way it grows. The next person I want to have is someone that you've seen up here already, and that's Lon. Lon Buss from Southwest Wisconsin. Is that right, Lon? South Central. And we'll talk about the way they approach men's ministry in his synod. Lon?
Thanks, Rich. Yes, back in 2002, our bishop at the time, Bishop Carlson, called a group of men, 10 to 15 of us, that he had been aware of guys doing stuff in their churches or had been involved previously, and I had helped a couple of years earlier doing a men's retreat at a Bible camp, so my name was on that list. And we had a brainstorming session. From that, we had a little weekend getaway for about 6 of us to continue formulating this idea of what could we do for men's ministry in South Central Synod of Wisconsin. From that, we formed what was then called, and we were proud of it, but we decided to shorten up. It was the South Central Synod of Wisconsin Volunteer Task Force, because we did not have any paid staff to work with. We did have a staff member, a synod staff member on the task force, but it was all his volunteer time. So, but we've shortened up, just gone with the LMM task force now, because we do not want to have and have never had any elections. The guys serve as they are able. We've had guys that have lost wives, guys who have been ill, guys who have had some serious issues in their family with cancer and different things. And also things change. We realize seasons in life. For myself, I've been one of probably 2 or 3 on the task force that have continued for these 10 years, and maybe my term is up. But actually, it's been exciting, and actually, it was a stepping stone to my involvement with Lutheran Men in Mission, because at that time, in 2002, we were not aware of Lutheran Men in Mission, even though it had been around. As far as this task force, there were guys in our synod that maybe were at national conferences, but so LMM was the best kept secret in the Madison area of Wisconsin at that time too. Well, we started that task force, and I put up there a little piece of our mission statement, and it states that we will provide and facilitate communications to congregations about opportunities that will allow them to network, link, share, and grow their men's ministries with their brothers from other congregations. So we were all about not reinventing the wheel. We didn't know exactly what that wheel was, and it was probably within 6 months of we'd having this meeting and not even know about Lutheran Men in Mission, that the project from LMM came out to give 15 congregations 6 Master Builder Bibles. Wow, we had a project. We had something we could do. We had something we could offer. And we were out to churches offering these Bibles, having Sunday morning breakfast meetings with them. And one of those gentlemen that I met at one of those Sunday morning sessions is one of our key leaders in Wisconsin for the 1 Year to Live retreat, James Sheevely. So how that just kind of, you never know where the seeds go and where they're planted, and Jim's real passionate about 1 Year to Live at this time too, and he's been serving on that task force with us. Well, there was a show, West Wing, on TV a while back, and I remember them using the term, we serve at the pleasure of the president. Well, that's what we kind of felt. We were serving at the pleasure of the bishop, to support and partner with them in the ministering to men, with men. So that partnership is how we felt we could carry out our mission and what we felt we needed to do or were driven to do by, through prayer and understanding God's will. And in that partnership, we basically started some communications. They could put a page on their website with our mission and events, and in their newsletters and e-newsletters, we were able to share our information. They also ran any of our events through their books. We don't have our own checking account. We didn't have our own checking account at that time. Those kind of things. But we were also, they also allowed us to be involved at synod events like synod assemblies. We have a display table similar to using materials similar to what you see on this little table back here. Nothing expensive, but some things that we could put together. And we also we'd always have a spreadsheet, sign up, name, telephone, email, and we started our contact list. And that was the way we started networking with guys directly. It was our synod contacts. Because even though the churches are getting, I'll be honest with you, even though the churches are getting the synod communications, either in paper or electronic, it's not a promise that the pastor is either going to for sure see it or pass it on. And if we have that direct connection, and even better if you have 2 or 3 guys from the same churches, so that if one guy's email goes dead, I got plenty of dead emails, I'll tell you that, but we try to follow up, and that's why we want the phone number. So that's been working out great. And at one time, I think we had 100 to 150 contacts through that mechanism. Still homegrown roots type stuff. So we did the displays and workshops, and it was an exciting way to share. We've been doing congregational visits, either breakfast meetings, or we've also called them town hall meetings in the evening, sharing maybe little bits of pieces of what LMM has to offer with our workshops and retreats. And in 2008, we had 3 guys attend that same 1 Year to Live retreat that Mike did just before the Omaha gathering. And there were 3 guys there, and one of them was Jim, and he was going thinking he was going to learn how to put on retreats. Little did he know it was going to change his life as well. And he shares that. Also a pastor, Pastor Scott Geister-Jones, he came to the hotel at the gathering after our retreat. He said, "Lon," and I've been given permission to use it. "This is the most spiritual event I've been to, or activity I've been to since seminary." Wow, when a pastor says that, I knew we had something special. So those guys brought it back to Wisconsin. I went back to one in March in 2009, the first one Mike hosted. And it's kind of like a wagon train effect going back towards the east for us. They brought it to Omaha, we took it to Wisconsin. It's a chain reaction, and since 2009 we've had 9 retreats spin off of the one in Omaha. And from the one in south central Wisconsin, there's been spawned 2 in northwestern Wisconsin. And one in Minnesota that Ken Motes has helped organize, and he also was instrumental in the northwest Wisconsin one, and then one in east central Wisconsin this year in the spring that Kevin Burke has teamed up with me to work on there. So we've had 9 in just about 3 years in that area, and we look forward to continuing to spread and grow and help it spiderweb back out from there. And we'll be talking more about the 1 Year to Live retreat tomorrow. There's a section on the agenda just for that event. In 2010, we took one step. I'd been playing this role as a leader for 9 years or more, and we needed to transition. I was getting really involved with the national group. We needed to transition some leadership, and we do have 2 co-leaders now of our task force, Jim Shively and Nate Tim. But we also felt it was time too to have a little more responsibility for our funds. We were running more retreats. It was going to be more work for the synod staff. So we found about something that's called an integrated auxiliary ministry. By being an integrated auxiliary ministry of the synod, we still had a close relationship with the synod. We had our own checking account, but it's somehow legally connected with the synod. It makes, when people write checks, it makes us a nonprofit organization because there's a connection to the synod, which has a connection to the ELCA. We got those. I've got some definitions for that. If you're interested, I can email you those because we got some of those information provided to us by our former treasurer of LMM, Harold Yost, and he had experience with that environment too. So we can share that. But that given us a little more structure as far as being able to do business, but as far as flexibility and guys being able to come on and serve when they can. I think there's something, they like that flexibility, and we'll keep moving forward with more retreats and workshops. Thank you.
So now you've heard a third type, right? As we're kind of moving across the spectrum. And it's informal. They get together. They don't have officers, but they just kind of make things happen. I've been doing that for several years. We've heard the results of that. Now what I want to do is to move into the last category, I'll say, of it, and that is the one I call the lone wolf. And no negative connotation there. But yes, Jim will object. But Jim Monkman. Right.
With all due respect, Rich.
But wait a minute, you're not from North Carolina, so you can't be the wolf pack.
Yes, we can.
Nevada? What's Nevada? Oh, is that a state?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is Jim Monkman.
It only has 2 cities, but it's a state.
Okay. All right. So, Jim Monkman from Colorado and Texas. I first met Jim in Texas.
Or maybe California for those of you
wherever.
from Nebraska.
But you're all set, sir. Okay, Jim, thank you.
Ed, are you a lone wolf or are you a member of the mob? Are you a lone wolf or are you a member of the mob? Yeah. Oh, darn. I'm going to do what Larry did. Because I'll walk away, I'm sure. What's that? Don't put the lights out. Don't put the lights out. I'll try not to. Pull it down. Too loud. Thank you. Okay. One thing I believe, and that really sang to me when I heard Doug say it the first time, one of the first times I met him, was men's ministry is about relationships. Okay? So lone wolf was, no, and that ain't me. I may be lonely, but I'm not a lone wolf. I'm busy connecting. There are lots of good men's ministries going on in the West. From a retreat I attended 2-3 weeks ago that is almost as old as I am, 53 years old, 12 churches in Southern California getting together, continuing that advance, they call it, because men advance, they don't retreat. Yeah, it's an old guy's thing. But it's 12 churches, been doing that for 53, 54, 55 years. It's an amazing thing. Tim Wright is doing some amazing work in Arizona with rites of passage for boys. There's a really cool rite of passage for emerging adult men being done by the pastor in South Lake Tahoe. How many 1 year to live retreats have there been in Colorado? Lots and lots. Wisconsin, Nebraska, and now California have all been helped by Colorado to make that happen. On the other hand, culturally, structure is not something that anybody in the West is interested in, especially if it's mandated from the top. Okay? So how do you connect, promote those good things going on without a task force or, heaven forbid, a board? Oops, wrong way. Yeah, that's it. In Coming of Age, one of the best things in that book, in my opinion, is I go. Identify, invite, and invest. Larry Mueller in Sacramento is probably the best at this that I've ever seen. He's been meeting with guys since he heard about it. And now one of them's married and has graduated from their group of 3, and they've added another. In Reno, Nevada, the A-men do home invasions. 3 guys, well, actually guys in their leadership of men, watch where there's transitions happening. Guys' marriage is going bad. He lost his job. He's gay and coming out. 3 guys get together, go to that guy's home, and love him. I mentioned Tim Wright earlier, Heroic Quest for Men. If you haven't been there, go look at it. It is the coolest confirmation program you have seen. The journey is that 6 days of emerging adult men going into the woods, fasting, and finding out who they are and where they've been, and coming through a transition. And these are just a few examples of the many things going on in the West. They're the ones I know about. So, what do we do? Relationship building. I go out, I meet people, I send emails, I talk to folks on the phone. Congregational dynamics. They're all over the map. Politically in California, they're as far right and as far left as you've seen on the politics and on theology. Synod office and staff relationships. The bishops are happy to see me when I come, and they'll sit down with me and chat because they really don't have a guy to connect to in their synods mostly. And then communication and organizing ideas. Again, what sings when I'm working on a project, the Western States Gathering, I'll mention it in a little bit, is, yeah, it makes sense to learn from other guys, but I don't want to do that in a thing I have to come to once a year. So, Synod communicator, Synod developer, we will be talking about those later, and there are descriptions of them later in your book, but the functions of these things, the telling guys and congregations in the synods what's happening, the communicator, are good things. But I'm not going to be able to say, would you be a communicator? What I can do with a relationship built is say, I'm having a hard time keeping up with letting everybody know. Can you help me with this? So if I've got a task, somebody may feel called to help me with that task. Synod developer, organizing things. Well, we can put together a committee or a task force to do a gathering, to do a 1 year to live. But to have that as a synod organization just doesn't work for us. So, we're doing high, wide, and deep. A youth gathering for men. We want it to be fun, we want it to be relational, and we want to get out in the outdoors in Tahoe. Next August, Western States. Y'all come, we won't exclude you, but we're focusing our marketing on the Western States. And we did 1 year to live, 7th of September to the 9th of September. It was amazing, 19 guys. And 3 of them are already helping me do Visalia next summer. We've got a yes, and a date, and a place, and support. So the second one's coming. It's exciting stuff, but it's not structured, and that's the challenge that I work in. Oops, is that mine or yours? Nope.
Jim, thanks so much for describing the environment that you're working in and what you're doing and the different things. So I think we've now covered the spectrum. You've seen it all, from the very tight structure that we have in the Carolinas to what's going on in the West. But they're all doing the same thing, right? And what are they doing? Building relationships, because that's what it is. And how do you do it? You go about it different ways. There's not one way to build relations, different ways, but that's really the key, the focus that we're working on. What I'd like to do now is open it to questions. I had asked you to hold off your questions. Well, the time has come. I'll ask the 4, Tim, Mike, Jim, Lon, come on up here so you can answer the questions. Okay? Where does South Carolina get all its money And how many men are involved? Tim?
I alluded to it a little bit earlier. We send out a yearbook, produce a yearbook, and it's sent to every congregation. And there are suggested goals in each one, so they give proportionately to their CCC members. We also have what we call a Committee of 100. We raise about $80,000 a year, $100 at a time. Now that's doable. You go to somebody and say, we're supporting mission churches. A mission church is where people are reached to find Christ in a new congregation, in a new area where maybe most of them are unchurched. That's something you can follow around. So we go out and we say, join the Committee of 100 for $100 at a time or more. And lots of conferences. Gosh, we'll have 300 men and women bring their spouses and celebrate in just one conference. We'll feed them yellow grits and gravy and hamburger steak, which is pretty popular around our spot, and nanner pudding. And anyway, we make it a celebration night. But we raise about $80,000 a year through that. And when you do that year after year, you become to get a pot, and we draw interest from that we can spend on ways that we normally couldn't. So North Carolina, they want men's groups to charter, each church to charter each year. I think it's $100 per church. They're much larger synod than we are, so they raise their funds through charters each year. Virginia Lutheran Men, very loosely organized, probably 8 guys total in that. They tried to do it like South Carolina, but that's one of those situations where they're probably better off to do it their own way because they've stayed the same size for 15 years. Lots of potential, they've got great synodical support too, but they don't have a way to raise those funds as well. But we've been doing it 75 years, you kind of get good at it. Yes, sir.
I think what you have to keep in mind with South and North Carolina too are 2 very critical things. One is history. Tim talked about 75 and 100 years. And another is culture. They are in the middle of the Bible Belt. Church is talked about in grocery stores there. I mean, that's a very different, unique culture, but especially the history. And it's much easier to raise that kind of money when you have a history. It's just the expected thing to do.
Yes.
Could you clarify one point? The CCC, the amount that's suggested from the church, could you clarify the fact that comes from the local men's group, not the church?
Yeah, the men give any funds that are given.
I was going to say that the question was that you wanted Tim to clarify where the money that the churches give to South Carolina Lutheran Men comes from.
They do it through fundraisers. They do it through offerings at each meeting once a month typically. They'll breakfast or supper that they have, they'll give. I'll tell you where my church had got most of their funds. They'd have a Father's Day bulletin and let you give honorariums or memorials. A congregation of 300 raised $1,200 to $1,400 a year just by that. And they give us privy to, they give us leeway to give it to wherever we need to let it to go. So lots of different ways. Car washes are typical fundraisers, but that's where most of it came from, quite honestly.
Tim, what you're really saying is the money doesn't come from the congregation, from the church budget itself. It's from the men of the congregation. It's their giving, be it through a fundraiser, or an offering that they give as part of their, when they get together, or that sort of thing.
We want it to come from the guys.
From the guys, not the church. It's not a church budget line item.
Oh, no, should not be.
Right. Steve?
Tim, another question for you is, how many churches do you or your team visit on an annual basis?
Question is, it's for Tim, how many churches does he or the leadership in South Carolina visit on an annual basis?
I'm Unit Activation Director, that's my title. I probably visit 35, 40 churches a year. I'm riding around Monday morning. If I don't have a big job going on, I got time, I'll stop in. You can catch a pastor in his office Monday morning. So I'll stop in and talk to him for 30 minutes and see what's going on and make a relationship with him or her. We visit probably 75 churches a year between the guys that are out and about and doing. So the bigger that we are, the more guys that we can get trained in at what we actually do. Then my wife doesn't fuss because I'm gone 100 nights a year. It spreads out, and I'm gone 30 nights a year, and she doesn't fuss quite as much. So, I'm kidding there, but you see what I'm doing? It gets spread around the more guys you got. But you have to be trained to do it. You can't go out and just blah, 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 blah. They can tell.
Tim, again, does this contribution request also get made to the mission churches or just to the more established churches?
The question is, does the contribution request from South Carolina Lutheran Men on Mission get made to the mission churches you're supporting, or just to the other churches, the contributing churches?
Once they're an established church, once they are, what do they call that? Chartered, yeah, they become one of our people on our rolls. I will tell you that one thing that we're starting to look at, if a church has been built because of Committee 100 and interest-free dollars, we're starting to say you should be our best and biggest givers, you know? So we're looking back on that. But yeah, they're included because they're one of us. Yeah.
Steve? Sure.
For Jim, do you have any kind of newsletter that you're putting together that you can publish, or that you do publish? Something that maybe some of us can see and
Yeah, the
start
the question from Steve is there a newsletter I publish? I don't publish a printed newsletter, no. I periodically send to my mailing list what's going on in the region.
Okay.
So you take advantage of email, which is a very effective tool. Very effective tool, easy to use.
Depending on the age group, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I use it in my synod. I send out a weekly Bible study that Doug passes on, the Bible study prayer request. I have about 80 people that I send it to. You know, men, some women, pastors, not just in the Metro DC Synod where I am, but in some others, through friends who have seen it and said, hey, would you send it to me? Sure, I'll put it on there. It doesn't mind.
I just thought of something. MailChimp is free. It's an e-newsletter service in the size that you're likely to have. I think it's less than 2,500 names. It doesn't cost you anything to use their service.
Other questions?
Nebraska has a website. I didn't hear anything about the others. Are they using websites everywhere? Do they connect in with the LMM website? What's best practice there?
The question here is about websites. The Nebraska LMM has a website, and other people have it. Are websites common? That sort of thing.
Steve, our executive secretary, has a relationship with the communicator, the guy that does the e-news for the Nebraska Synod, and the two of them, along with our pastoral advisor, Pastor Darwin Garten, developed a website for us. So you can get to our website off the Synod website and through the Synod website to LMM's website. So they all three link together.
And then, when you go, they mentioned merge. It actually looks like we're part of the Synod and we're a partner with the Synod. Can you just go into that for the guys a little bit more?
I can't, because I'm not technical.
Oh.
Come on, Steve.
Well, Steve's coming up. I'll just throw one in there too. We do have a page on our Synod website that our Synod staff does maintain with us. But I'd like to throw in the notes. I think it'd be a great idea if on the LMM website, if we had all the Synod websites connected, or how they can get, or the pages, even if it's buried in a Synod website, how the pages to get to the men's websites in those Synods. So we'll think about that for another connection. Go for it.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, Steve. Two things. First is a website is not going to draw people. It will push people away if it's no good. Second, we'll talk more about the net tomorrow during faith formation.
Steve?
Yeah, no, Jim, you're absolutely right. And one of the goals that we had was to make sure that our website merged with, from a look and feel perspective, with the Nebraska LMM, or the Nebraska Synod site, so that it looked like it was seamless and that we were one-on-one partners with them. That we didn't go from a blue and black to a red and green, and we had the same panes, we have the same look and feel, we have the same links, and we did that on purpose, and it just makes everything merge, and that was really what my point was, Mike, was to make sure that you look like partners.
We have sclmm.org, our new revised website that's more for information. The presidents of each conference has access to it, all the officers. We have a special events guy that plugs in his information to that. It's very informative. I also would be remiss if I didn't say that not only men give to us, but I had two ladies at my other church that never been married that gave to the Committee 100 for like 20 years, and I should never forget that. She told me that she loves our Lutheran Men in Mission organization as much as any man does, so the women do support us highly also. Yeah.
Well, let's see. Anybody else? Joe has one question. I'm looking for other questions. So we want to wrap this up and then move into some sharing the different ideas. Okay? No one else? Then Joe.
Tim, would you mention that we're on Facebook and Twitter as well?
Yeah, we do have Facebook and Twitter. We also put out 4 times a year we have a newsletter also.
And tomorrow, as Jim said, during a discussion on Faith Formation 2020, there'll be a lot of talk about how to use social media to reach out to men. Doug?
Just a brief comment, if I may.
If you come up to the microphone, sir.
I'm not normally the guy to talk about organization and all of that kind of stuff, but Tim mentioned something about integrated auxiliary of the synod. That's something that I would encourage many of you to look into, for the reason that every now and then I get a phone call or an email from someone assuming that you and the synods are under our 501c3 status. You're not. We are not an integrated organization of the ELCA. We are a separately incorporated entity, and we specifically made a decision to be a separately incorporated entity and not repeat that 65 times potentially. And so I really want to encourage you, if you're organized at all, to talk to Lon about being an integrated auxiliary, which will give you the status for your employer ID and 501c3 number tax exemption. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And then what we want to do is share between us some things that have been. Yes, yes. All right. It's been tough. It's been tough. And I did meet Gio Gonzalez a few months ago, so. And I did tell him how to pitch. And he's 21-game winner, so, he listened to me. What we want to do is get into a session to share ideas, things that work, have worked in your congregation, in your synod, with making relationships, with reaching out. And so we're going to do it as, I'll say an open forum, hopefully controlled. Okay, and Kyle Langford has agreed to be the reporter. Keith. I always call you Kyle. And Keith Pedersen. I'm sorry. Keith, I always get him wrong. So anyway, has agreed to be our recorder. So we'll do that. I'm going to share one from my congregation that happens next Friday, when we watch the Nationals game in the League Championship series. We're looking at my church to find out how can we reach out to younger guys, because we've got a whole bunch of new young families coming in, and how can we reach out to them? We have our Saturday morning men's pancake breakfast, except we don't have pancakes, we have sausages and grits and scrambled eggs, but it's mostly guys 50 and over. So how can we reach out to the younger guys? And what we're doing next Friday night at the White House, because the pastor said we couldn't do it in the church. So we're going to do it at my house. We're having brews with the brothers. And what we're going to do is have a beer tasting. And we're going to have 8 kinds of beer. And this is not bad beer. This is the good stuff. The good stuff. Thank you. So we're going to have 8 kinds of beer, and we're going to sample it. So everybody get a sample of each of the 8. And the one who is going to do it is a young guy in his mid-20s that just joined our church, who happens to be a salesman for the premium beer distributors of Northern Virginia. Yes. And when I was introduced to him, I had a revelation. And I said, Chris, have I got an opportunity for you? How would you like to join with some other guys and talk about your job, what you do, which involves selling beer? And he picked up on that immediately. So that's what we're going to do. And we have about 12 young guys coming, along with 14 older guys, coming to the event. We're going to sample the 8 beers. We're going to have bratwurst, sauerkraut, baked pretzels, but it's brews with the brothers. A totally different thing. Never tried it before. I figured, hey, it'll work. It'll work, reaching out to those guys.
When is this?
Next Friday night, okay? Next Friday night. 8 quality beers. At the White House. Sure, you can come. You can come. You can come. You can come. So, but that's what we're doing. Yeah. No, so that's just something, you know, again, totally off the wall. Had never done anything like that. But said, why not? Give it a try. And that's one way to do it. Reach out. Try something else. You know? Try something else. So I share that one from a congregational perspective. And I will share you with the results on Sunday morning. You know, I told the pastor we've got it worked out so it's 3 ounces of beer of each of the 8. That's 2 12-ounce cans across 2.5 hours. So that's okay. Interesting thing. Had a guy approach me. I gave a temple talk about this. And after the temple talk, guy said, I don't like beer, but I want to be there. And I said, what if I said we were going to have root beer and birch beer? Would you come? He said, absolutely. So we are having 8 beers, root beer and birch beer for those. And I've now been advertising that way. And that also points to the need, you know, the need to be inclusive and think of things like that. Okay? So I just throw that out as something that different, something different. It is, I assume it has birch root in it. I don't know. I have no idea. I see it on the shelf. It says birch beer. I don't know. Yeah, it's right. It's a type of root beer. Yeah. So that's what we're doing. Yeah. Okay. Others? Jim?
Something I'm doing with Presbyterians in Dallas is...
Does that work? Do you need them by the mic? It's helpful. Okay.
I went on a retreat with these Presbyterians last spring and showed them Man Talk cards. And since it's Texas and Man Talk cards, we're doing a Texas Hold'em tournament with the entry fees and unlimited buy-in going to a charity. And we're using the Man Talk cards to be able to get to know one another while we're playing.
Dennis, why don't you say your name and where you're from first?
I'm Dennis Remington from the great state of Nebraska.
We want it on the record.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Our church, our men, for the last 3 years, we have gone to Gavin's Point, which is about a 3-hour drive for the weekend, and we go fishing. And then we have a fish fry for the congregation. And the little old ladies, they look forward to that, especially the ones that are widows, because they have nobody to catch fish for them. And the men say the best fellowship is, you know, 3 or 4 guys in a boat. We do have great fellowship around the bonfire with a little brew and conversation, but the best is in the boats.
Bernie Bresson from Northeast Ohio Synod. We haven't done this yet, but it's planned for this summer. We're planning a tri-synod event with the 3 synods in Ohio, and we were trying to brainstorm how we're going to get the younger guys to be at this event. And so one of the things that we're going to try to do is have a cornhole tournament, and we're going to charge $5 or $10 a team, but you have to bring somebody a number of years younger than you to be your partner. And then the money we collect off the tournament is going to be sent into Lutheran World or World Hunger. So it's something we're going to try. If you want to be in the tournament, you got to bring, if you don't have a son to bring with you, then you need to bring a young man from your congregation along. So something we're going to try to do. Lon.
Ken wants to know what cornhole is.
Who wants to know? Well, it's got a lot of different names. It's a board that has 3 holes in it, and you. Oh, okay. So that's something. It's 3 holes. You throw bean bags. I think they're 30 foot apart, and you have to win going out with 21 points. It's 1, 3, and 5. I think is. I don't know. I don't play it much, but it's big in our area. I know every bar, everywhere you go, they have tournaments going on. You go to a home improvement show in the spring, and they had cornhole tournaments set up. But and then in our own conference, one of the things we do it started out just to be an event for the men. We did a steak fry, but then it's actually turned into we've been doing it on Saturday evening. So we decided that it wasn't just going to be for the men. You're allowed to bring your wife or significant other, so it actually it's turned out now to a chicken breast or a strip steak, and we had 70 some people just a couple weeks ago for the steak fry, and we raised about $900 off of that. So it's an evening that you can take your wife out. Our church is in the town of Paris, so we promote it as an evening in Paris. So how often can you take your spouse to Paris to have a steak dinner?
Thanks, Bernie. Clever.
Just a couple of ideals that we do. We call our instead of calling our young men or boys, we call them MITs, men in training. And so we try to involve the men in training in the things that we do. We, for the last 3 years, we have hosted Men's Day. It's really a men's weekend. We have a prayer breakfast on Saturday, and then on Sunday, the men lead us in worship. So from the everybody that is leading worship that particular Sunday is a man. So the scripture reader, the person who prays, and then the thing that we also have developed is a men's choir. And so the men, even though some of them can't even sing, have volunteered to be in the men's choir. And so this year, I was gone. I was there for rehearsal for 1 week. I missed a week, and then I came back. And when I came back, the men what normally happened is the men who sing in the choir, took all the leads. When I came back, there were men who took the leads for songs that had really never sung publicly before. And so we had about 3 or 4 different men who really stepped up to the plate to try to take the leads on these songs, and they really did a good job. So, and then the other thing that we do is, like once a quarter, we have a Sunday in which we invite the people in the congregation to invite a man that they know that does not go to church to come to church. So really the emphasis on that Sunday is to really invite men to come to church. So. It depends. On different Sundays, we try to, connect them to obviously the things that are going on in the men's group that we have. So we try to invite them. There's usually some sort of cards about real men pray, even some prayers, some little simple prayers that that men can pray. We try to point them to different events that again are happening in the church or even in the larger community, because remember, we don't do this thing by ourselves, but we're connected to something bigger. So
Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that Larry pointed out that other people have said, and you may have missed it, but is very important, is when you have these kinds of events, always have another event in mind. Always have that other event in mind, because when men come to an event, they normally are happy to be there or they wouldn't have come, energized. And that is a great time to say, we're thinking of doing this. Are you interested? Would you be willing? How would you like to sign up? And take advantage of the energy you've created, rather than saying, well, when we get something else, we'll let you know. Because by then you've lost that momentum. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Always be thinking ahead and being willing to offer in different things. You've heard several different suggestions here. Several different suggestions. Because as we talked about the synodical models, there's no one right answer. There is no one right answer. You try different things. That doesn't mean they will always be successful. I have organized many, many things that have bombed. And okay. And at first, it used to really, I'll be honest, it used to really bother me. Gee, I spent all this time. But then what I came to accept is that it just wasn't time. It wasn't in God's time for it to happen. And once I started to accept that, what a difference it made. And okay, we'll try it. If it doesn't work, it wasn't in God's time. It wasn't part of his plan. But there is a time it will work. And you just kind of move forward. So I throw that out as some encouragement in case you've had that experiences, because I bet you all have. Other ideas? Ken, if you give your name and where you're from.
Ken Reinell from the great state of Ohio. That's okay. Bernie didn't mention something else that I guess he got the idea from South Carolina with the golf outing. If I'm not mistaken. But what we do with the golf outing is we raise funds for seminary students. And the one reason I wanted to definitely bring this up, because for down the road, a lot of the problems that we seem to have right now is getting cooperation from some of the pastors to allow us into their church to talk about a men's organization, because they want to keep control. But by giving a scholarship and a Bible to the seminary students, we are letting them know that we exist, that we're there to help them, so that when they become pastors, that they will be more willing to let us come in and help them get a men's group started in their church. And that's one of those things that you're not going to see a response right away, but that's future building for down the road. So if you can organize a golf outing or something else and give scholarships to seminary students in your synod or your region, that'll help.
Thanks, Ken. Others, Tim?
In South Carolina, we try to have a Lutheran Men in Mission Sunday, which is the third Sunday in September. And we will send out through email an insert, a bulletin insert, and hopefully they will do it on the third, some do it on the fourth Sunday. So that rallies us around. The men take ownership of the service that day. Several of us get to give sermons from the board. Now, after the coming of age seminar that we went to in Charlotte several years ago, we came back and met with some pastors, and they said we need to do something with our 18 to 35. So we created a young men's ministry in South Carolina called MIA. It's the Men in Action for the Men Missing in Action. So what we did first was took them whitewater rafting, and that's action. The guys are comfortable outdoors. We didn't do anything preachy. We didn't do anything teachy. Sat around the campfire Friday night, talked, shared. We encouraged. We had 41 people go the second year, and I think 20-something of those were father-son teams. So that was pretty cool. Kyle has been and been one of our leaders. So that's been a good connection. Some of the things that we've done through that are skeet shoots. Some guys have never shot a shotgun. Other guys love it, so they turn out for that. Don't forget about the families on those kind of things too. You know, you ask a guy to come to an event, he's got to leave his family. What do we teach? Responsibility of family for your guys. So we have family hikes at Congaree National Park. They can bring their families. We'll feed them some hot dogs at the end. One of our most successful things is a wildlife night. We'll have a barbecue, or sometimes the guys will just bring deer meat, venison, stew, steaks, we'll have chicken, we'll have barbecue, anything wildlife that they can kill and cook and bring in. And we'll have, we'll have big time prizes with shotguns and things that vendors will give us. And we've had 100, 150 folks there on an evening. So go where they are, make them comfortable, find out what they want, and give what they need, or give what they want.
It's amazing people will respond to some of these. People you never thought of said, sure, I'll come out and watch a Clint Eastwood movie. They may be thinking Dirty Harry. Instead, they get Walter Kozlowski, right? But they won't step on his grass, right? If you've seen the movie, you'll understand where that comes from. And then fundraising, we've heard golf outings. There are multiple other ones. Service, the seminarian scholarships that are being done in Ohio. Mission trips, all kinds of mission trips. Disaster relief that the Carolinas are doing. Fellowship and fun. Breakfast with a bishop at Cabela's. Those kinds of things. So all sorts of interesting things.
Richard Stroud, Northwest Ohio. Here 4 years ago, I was, and Bob back there, we were taking a gentleman back from our board meeting. And Bob asked me what I did on Labor Day. And I said, well, usually with the family, something like that. I said, what do you do on Labor Day? He said, I walk the Mackinac Bridge. If you know the Mackinac Bridge, it's 5 miles long, except it's 28 feet, less than 5 miles. So what we did 4 years ago, we sent letters out to all the churches, 175 of them, to get sponsors for the walkers. Well, what happened was we got started with it with $2,300 the first year. So we said, okay, well, we're going to do this the second year. The second year we got $3,500. So that said, hey, boy, that gives us another goal. The third year we got $5,000. This year we got $7,800. Doug was one of the contributors to one of your people from Northeast Ohio, Tom Green. So what we do with the money, we have 19 walkers. They come as far as 450 miles to walk that bridge. If you know the bridge, if it gets 50 miles an hour winds, they're going to close it. Well, this year we had 7-mile-an-hour winds and a temperature of 70 degrees, which is perfect on Labor Day morning. So we're going to continue that because each year when they do it, it's going to increase. We know that. What the money goes for is Lutheran Home of Mercy, which is in Williston. This is a home for developmentally disabled and also mentally disabled folks. And half of it goes there and half of it goes to the Filling Home in Napoleon, Ohio, both in Northwest Ohio. So this is going to be a continuing project. We have the house that we stay at, although Bob calls it a cabin, and the men that come up can stay there for $20 a night. Now, where can you get a motel for $20 a night? This bed may not be the best, but believe me, it's good when you're tired. Now, what we do up there in St. Ignace, Michigan, on the north side, we have a church that will prepare breakfast for us on Monday morning, Labor Day, before we do the walk. We worship with them on Sunday morning. We wear our T-shirts, bright yellow T-shirts, not a year on it, Walkers of the Mackinac Bridge. So this is something that we will continue. Now, here is the most exciting thing. We have a fellow in one of our churches near Marion, had a flesh-eating virus. He lost both legs in 2005. He wheels across the bridge with no help and no rest the 5 miles. He is an inspiration to a lot of folks in those churches. Now, another reason of success, and you got to get out in the field. We need more workers in the field. We go to the churches and present. He goes with us, and we present this story. We come out of the church, one church with $300, another one $400. This year we had a church in Bryan, Ohio, up in the corner of the state. They had never participated before, but their men plan their events a year ahead. They have a printed program a year ahead. One day I went to the mailbox and I got a check for $1,600 from those 4 men that walked. Now, how do you think of that? Isn't that great? So we will continue on with this as long as the Lord lets us do it. I've been chairman 4 years. I'm trying to get out of it, but I don't know whether I will or not because each year it gets more exciting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard. There's another example of something to do, something different. And what it also highlights is, for something good like that, doing it year after year after year and how it grows. And it becomes part of the culture. Committee of 100 that Tim talked about. That's something else to keep in mind, right? Is doing those things that way, year after year after year. Get more people involved each time. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing. And Keith Langford has captured this, and we will publish it. Right, Keith? Yeah. Okay, very good. Doug?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rich, and thanks everyone for sharing. I'll quickly add a couple things. Hope Lutheran Church in Fargo, North Dakota, they have an annual event called Men in Boats. And the men from Hope Lutheran Church in Fargo, North Dakota go to Devil's Lake, which I think is kind of in North Dakota. And I guess they have about 150 boats. They're a large church in Fargo. And they really emphasize the fishing. But then they slip some Bible study in. And as they're shoving the boats away, they say, here, just talk about this. And then they cook the fish up on shore and all of that. But what they emphasize is going to these fishing associations or clubs and inviting them to come. And guys that don't care about church but love to fish, come. And a couple of years ago, a couple of those guys, after having been with them for the weekend, decided they needed to be baptized. Now that's what it's about, guys. And I got really excited. I had these visions of baptizing men in Devil's Lake. That's a newsletter story. This is a church 2 miles away from my folks' house, so I stopped in and said, give me the story, give me the pictures. Oh, Doug, we waited till we took them home and we baptized them in the church. And I thought, oh, come on, that's so, 1 year to live would be great at Devil's Lake, wouldn't it? Another thing, St. Matthew's Lutheran Church in Beaverton, Oregon, and this is done, I've heard, in numbers of churches around the country, a cars ministry. And they have done literally hundreds of cars. Give us your car as long as it's still running. We will fix it up, and we will give it to somebody who needs it. So there are mothers who are on welfare that are working because these guys have fixed up a car, and they have given it to them, and they've even brought it to the point where they have an actual part of the liturgy of the giving of the keys. And in other parts of the country, I've heard in other churches, they do something similar. Once a month, invite the women and the elderly to bring their cars in for an oil change and go through the car. And if something more is needed, refer them to a reputable mechanic. Those kinds of things. So guys love to do things with their hands. Love to one of the magic of going to Cabela's is have your event in a place where men want to go. Generally, that's not the church. Have it in a place where people want to go. Have it in a place that's kind of fun. We'll be talking a lot more about that kind of stuff. And we're winding down now. I want to talk for just a few minutes about the miracle of this ministry, of Lutheran Men in Mission. We will be celebrating 25 years next year, and you'll be hearing a little bit about that, about how we're thinking about celebrating that across the country. But, it's by the grace of God that we're here. And when I hear about these churches in in Tim, South Carolina, North Carolina, Nebraska, Ohio, and also Texas. It's true that in the late 60s and early 70s, the church fathers and mothers of the LCA and ALC determined that church-wide men's ministry was no longer needed, and it was discontinued. But there were men in these pockets, especially those areas, that never stopped, that never quit. And when the ELCA was coming into existence, there were men from those places that would find out where the commission to create a new Lutheran church was meeting, and then they would go and meet there as well. Not that they were on the agenda, because they didn't put them on the agenda, but they'd hang out and wait for them to take a break or take a lunch or take breakfast or whatever. And they just did not give up. And then at the constituting convention of the ELCA, I'm told, I haven't checked this out, the last resolution of the constituting convention is, there shall be a men's organization. And so there was. Well, where do we put it? Well, somehow the church is going to have to help underwrite it until it gets on its own. I was just thinking about this the other day. This is a history of our contributions. And there we are in 1988, where we have, we've started in, we started in Seguin. We go a couple of years later to Newberry and then to Kenosha. And 92, when I showed up, they had spent, they had raised $27,000 that year, and they had overspent their budget by $24,000. And I said, that's when I said, should I be buying this new house or not? And all these guys said, go and buy your house. And then they went home because they had houses. And and it was probably the greatest thing that happened to us at that time, because that's when we sat down and said, what is this about? This is about men. Promise Keepers was alive, and most Lutherans didn't even know that we existed and all of that kind of stuff. And that's when the whole terminology of master builders began to develop. And 1 Corinthians chapter 3, 2 Corinthians 3, and Paul being a skilled master builder. And then about right here in 94, 95, we got a great amount of money, a great subsidy from one of the predecessors of Thrivent Financial for Lutherans. And by the way, Dave, we're so happy to have you here with us this weekend and so grateful for your support. And we were able to have a conference probably 10 times this size down here at the Sheridan. And that's where, like, some young guy, in South Carolina, they said, we got this young pup, and his name is Tim. We think he might amount to something. Can we bring him along? And so we said, Tim is a result of that. And these guys at that, I remember, came forward with just all kinds of gifts and offerings. And we decided then eventually to stop doing our events every 2 years and go to every 3 years, because the board was saying, we just get into our jobs and all of a sudden we're switching. And so we're going to Minneapolis, and then we go to Breckenridge. And, you know, that was pretty radical. And we'll talk about this tomorrow. I mean, to go that far west, which those of us from the west really don't consider that far west. That's kind of on the eastern edge of the west. And we had the biggest attendance we'd ever had, because go to places where guys want to go. We look up here, and these are the Bibles. We began to get into this Bible ministry, and we had some special infusion of cash just to get the Bible ministry going. And we come along here to 2005, and the bishop says it's time for Lutheran Men in Mission to grow up, stand on its own. I went up to the bishop's office and I said, you're exactly right, but here's what we need. You know, we just need a couple of years to do this, and until then we need to be put with evangelical outreach, which we were. And then I said, and then we need to have you let us be as independent as the women. And that's when I got some coughs and chokes, and well, we don't know if we can do that. Well, anyway, we are much more independent than the women right now. But anyway, so these are the years, whoops, and these are we get into these years, well, it looks like we're kind of hurting, and we were with the annual fund, but you see, we had a donor step forward. One thing I had learned about fundraising was you go to your leaders first and see what you have. There was a man by the name of Doug Larson who had told me way back here, I want you to go back to your office and write me a letter and tell me what you'd do with a major gift. And I remember, I'm this new guy, you know. I'm thinking, yippee, that wasn't that hard. And then I sat down and I thought, major gift. I wonder what that would be, you know. Maybe he would be thinking of it a little differently than a churchman would. And I honestly wrote him a letter and I said, I don't know what you mean. But I wrote this letter and I said, from $1,000 to $100,000, here's what we would do. I had never asked anybody for something like that. I thought, the guy's going to think I'm flat out nuts. Sent the letter anyway, and I called Doug a few days later and I said, do you think I'm crazy? And he said, what I think is I'm completely overwhelmed. That you think I'm the caliber of businessman that would have that kind of wherewithal. Now, Doug, I want to tell you that if God blesses my business like I believe he will, I'll do that. I'll do something like that. So I start calling the leaders when we need to raise this money and become independent. And I called Doug Larson and he said, Ann and I have been talking. We want to give you $500,000. And we challenge you to match it. And the board said, we will accept that challenge. $500,000 in cash and $500,000 in deferred gifts, wills, and so on. And 2008, we did it, by golly. We did it. So that hurt the annual fund a little bit. 2009, our incorporation becomes official, final. And look what happens after that. Whoops. After that, it's straight up. Need to tell you, this year, our goal is $325,000. That is $100,000 over what we received last year. But here's the good news. And last year, we received $221,000 for the whole year. This year, at this point in time, at this date, we're just $15,000 shy of where we were last year for the whole year. And we've got a quarter left. Our year ends January 31st. So this is just to kind of give you a brief history of Lutheran Men in Mission, to talk about God's faithfulness. Just today, I had an interesting conversation in the elevator, and it was with somebody who works in the office of the treasurer here in the ELCA. How's your ministry going? Okay. Dying, drying up, losing money. And I said, as a matter of fact, it is going gangbusters. And I told him what I just shared with you, that we are nearly at our complete total for last year, and it blew his mind, because he just doesn't hear that kind of thing these days. That says something about the faithfulness of God and the faithfulness of God's servants. We have just $119,000 to go. I want you to know your board, and I should have also included the Development Council, because we have a Development Council that helps us with this. The Development Council board and staff, well, that, Kyle too, have committed over $70,000 to our annual campaign. We have 8 men, some of them on the board and staff have committed or given $10,000 each. We're actually looking for 4 more. I'm just saying, pray about it. If you're, I don't know, maybe you're one of those 4. We're also looking for a man that might give us a $15,000 phone-a-thon challenge. We have a phone-a-thon planned in the next month or so, where we're going to be contacting new donors. Maybe, maybe that man is here. But also, we really look for gifts of 1,000, 500, and especially 250, and all gifts are appreciated. Guys, God is blessing this ministry. And I can honestly say, January, it'll be 20 years for me, and I'm having more fun now than I have ever had before. Because it's like God's foot is on the accelerator, and we're moving ahead. And so, by the end of this, David Swartling, when we were doing the tour, I don't know if you all heard this, he says to some of you, now, you don't have to tip Doug. And I said, oh, that opportunity will come later this weekend. You have a contribution envelope in your notebook. And we will have a closing worship service. I'd like you to bring that contribution envelope with you to the closing worship service, or if you'd like to give it to myself or one of the board members before then, that would be fine as well. And at this time, I'd like to call on Bernie Bresson. Did you want the microphone?
Doug has kind of got accustomed when I come to Chicago for a board meeting to bring an envelope with me. So again, today, from the Northeast Ohio Synod men, $1,000 to help that total go up a little bit.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you, Bernie, and thank you, Northeast Ohio.
Gentlemen, as you know in the Bible, there was a time when Moses was on his journey with the people of Israel. And I'm going to move this closer. I feel like I'm hollering. And Moses was on this journey in Israel. And as he was traveling, the peoples became a little upset with God that they weren't providing the needs they thought they needed. And I'm going to read a little scripture because I think it really applies. And sometimes I think from Doug to Rich to the board members and even us as individuals, sometimes we are feeling like Moses felt that day. And there's probably other guys, and your pastor probably feels he or she like Moses did at that time. So I'm going to read a little scripture from here as well as share a little bit about what Jesus said as far as discipleship, because we use the term men's ministry, but I think we're also going to start using the term a little more here and there, men's discipleship. So from the book of Numbers, then the Lord said to Moses, "Gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their stand there with you." Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 men of the elders of the people and placed them around the tent. Then the Lord came down in a cloud and spoke to him, and took some of the Spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 elders. As soon as the Spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but they did not continue doing it. Now 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and the other Medad, and the Spirit rested on them also. They were among those registered, but had not gone out to the tent. And so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, "Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp." And Joshua the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses from his youth, said, "My lord Moses, stop them." But Moses said to him, "Are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, and the Lord would put his Spirit on them." The word of the Lord. Also, from the book of Matthew, as mentioned earlier, Jesus shared with us, Jesus said, "I have given all authority in heaven and on earth, therefore go and make disciples of all nations." Well, from this little daily devotion book that I use, it was about a week or so ago, and I sometimes am looking for words to share at events like this or other things, and it just so happens that I end up reading it some morning. It stays with me. So here, I'd like to share what this author shared. The author is Daniel Meyer in the Witness Essentials book. "It isn't just the job of paid pastors and evangelists and missionaries to scatter the seed of the new life God desires to give every human being. None other than Jesus himself calls you to take your place among the great cloud of witnesses," from Hebrews, "through whom he has been spreading his kingdom's life for many centuries and continues to work now through our world. You are not a beleaguered minority up against impossible forces. You are a privileged member of the greatest movement in the history and the only one that will be around in the end, according to Revelations. Christ has promised to supply you with the power to do his work, and as his history shows, Jesus always keeps his promises. Let's close with prayer, guys. Please stand and share your hands with the man next to you.